You're listening to 15 Minutes, where we feature community leaders sharing what the rest of us should know but likely don't.
Hello, everyone. Michael Renfro here. I'm the host of 15 Minutes, where we talk with top-notch law firms and lawyers about what it takes to grow a successful law practice. This episode is brought to you by Gladiator Law Marketing, where we deliver tailor-made services to help you accomplish your objectives and maximize your growth potential. To have a successful marketing campaign and make sure you're getting the best ROI, your firm needs to have better website and better content almost always. At Gladiator Law Marketing, we use artificial intelligence combined with machine learning, as well as literally now over a century of experience to outperform. And our experience, by the way, folks, is specifically to law. That's all we work with, is lawyers and law firms. And our experience is really there, and it outperforms the competition. If you want to learn more, please go to gladiatorlawmarketing.com. All those words are spelled standard, Gladiator Law Marketing. And you can schedule a free marketing consultation, or feel free to reach out to me directly. My email address is Michael, M-I-C-H, Alpha Echo Lima, A-E-L, at gladiatorlawmarketing.com. And with that, we'll talk to our guest today, who is Ross Epstein. Ross, how are you doing today?
Very well, thank you.
And Ross, I'll just go ahead and ask you real quick, what is your main practice area?
My main practice area is a mix of intellectual property and corporate transactional work. So it's
Which
patents,
makes sense.
Yeah, so it's patents and trademarks on the prosecution side as opposed to litigation, although the firm does IP litigation. And on the transactional side, it's everything from startup to operation, structuring and formation, mergers and acquisitions, key employee agreements, incentive employment plans, as well as anything that comes up in the life cycle of a private business.
So really, I'm assuming the opportunity that you would like is to have a new company and then be able to keep them through the life of their business.
Well, that's the best client, is one that we can grow with and help grow. Both, it doesn't always have to be a technology-based business, but quite a few of my clients are. Patents in those types of companies become central to the overall value, and helping them grow and actually launch a product and raise the money that they need, and ultimately the owners exit and realize the benefits of all their hard work. That's the best possible outcome for me when my clients ring the bell.
No, that's pretty cool. It's funny. The gentleman that I interviewed last, similarly, and I'll just say it like this, but he does just crypto. But his whole thing is a crypto business from beginning to end, and taking him there. But he got into it because he opened a crypto business while he was in law school and changed his whole focus. So, funny how things work out, right? That kind of leads me into my first question. How did you get started with this particular? How did this practice? I'm assuming this is probably an evolution of many years of law. So how did you end up getting to here?
Yeah, so I've had a relatively unusual career path as an attorney. I started off in a very traditional way. When I finished law school, I worked for a federal judge in San Diego, which is where I currently am. And then from that position, joined a big law firm at the time, which doesn't exist anymore. There have been a few flameouts,
right,
gigantic law firms. But those first 5 years I sort of describe as my first career as a lawyer. And I was essentially a business litigator. And that was a very intense experience, the sort of thing that a lot of young lawyers who work for big law firms go through. It's almost like a rite of passage. But the unusual part comes because at the time, because I'm a little bit older than you are, the world changed while I was in that first 5 years of my career. The Cold War ended, Eastern Europe opened up. And for me, having had a number of really interesting travel experiences, that was a very personal thing, not to mention a one-time in history kind of moment.
Right.
So I was irresistibly drawn to get involved in the transformation that I was sure was going to be successful from the former Soviet economic model to the free market economy. But living in San Diego, it's a long way from Europe. It's both in terms of distance and time. So I ultimately decided the only way you could really get involved was to go there. So I resigned from the firm and moved to Prague in 1992.
I was about to ask you what year this was.
And not having any real clear idea what I was going to do, but had a number of ideas, none of which worked. In terms of, from a business perspective, I was unqualified to practice law in any way, because one of the hard lessons was if you're a litigator, you have very few translatable skills in the business. So ultimately, I started a telecom business in Prague, which wound up taking on a life of its own. Went from Prague to Budapest to Warsaw, ultimately focused on Poland, expanded in Poland, went through a couple rounds of financing, and then I exited in 2001 from that business and came back to San Diego with a wife and 2 kids, who I met my wife in Warsaw. She's Polish. We married there. Our kids are born there. And when I got back to San Diego, which I always intended to do because it's a special place in the world, as far as I'm
right. It was never, I kind of heard that it was never it was always the intention to come back, never the intention to stay.
Right. And so coming back to San Diego, I never intended to get back into law. I thought that I was finished with that part of my life. I just finished this, what I call the second career I had in the telecom industry. But when I got back to San Diego, it was 2001, post.com bust. And the world, from that perspective, especially the telecom internet software world, was in massive contraction. And anything I was seeing in San Diego, even though it had become a significant telecom town, was not a really good fit. So I got back into law temporarily in 2001. And the idea originally was to form my own firm, which I did, to offer myself as an independent, an outside general counsel, trying to acquire 5 to 10 clients on a retained basis, which would afford me a living, support my family. The exit, unfortunately, was not the home run it might have been. It was more like a single. It's the way I describe it. And so I still had to work and support a family. So that law practice was intended to be a bridge into whatever the next thing I was going to do on the business side. But then an opportunity came to open the San Diego office for a DC-based life sciences patent firm. And if you know the San Diego marketplace, at that point in time, it had evolved from a very sleepy kind of tourist, military, real estate town into a real R&D center for both biotech, life sciences generally, tech generally, not as significant as the Bay Area, but still one of the top.
But it was still it was on. It's the way that Denver now is on the map. Like there's certain cities have just popped up in this area, and I know San Diego was one of the earlier ones.
Right, and still is probably second or third in the world, literally, in terms of the concentration of life sciences and tech businesses. So joining a patent firm made a lot of sense. And personally, having been pre-med in college and having come from a family of doctors, and then having 9 years of telecom internet software hands-on experience in the trenches.
And you ran the business too.
Very comfortable traveling in those areas. And so the idea of joining a patent firm and opening their San Diego office to me was just another startup in a lot of ways.
So let me I just want to make sure that I'm understanding. You joined a large law firm, but were essentially opening up the San Diego branch, if you will.
Not a large law firm, but yes, opening the San Diego branch.
Okay. A decent law firm then, obviously, if they were branching out, they were growing.
Right. A medium size. And in the patent world, that's, 10 to 20 lawyers.
Okay.
Patent lawyers, right? Because patent lawyers are a rare breed. And even the marquee firms who have patent practices, it's actually usually a pretty small group of, 5 people typically.
I've used one, and when I did my search, just to give you this, addition, I never even found a firm that had multiple. All that I found were only solos in my area. I was in Clearwater, Florida, but they were all, it was all solos, and some of them, just to give you, for instance, new copyrights and trademarks, but some of them just patents, and that was it. So I've seen that as being a very niche type of whatever you want to call it, practice area, I guess.
It was, and not only patents for this particular firm, but almost all life sciences, right? So it was a very specific. The founder of the firm was an old family friend. He himself had been a chief patent counsel at some big pharma companies before he went into private practice, and so this firm was that. The opening of San Diego was an opportunity to grow the firm. And for me, it was a unique opportunity to get into a field that made a lot of sense once I understood the San Diego market, which was one of the many lessons I learned while I was overseas, was how to assess a market. and especially in a place like Eastern Europe in those days, those markets were brand new. Nobody knew what they were doing. And still, I managed to figure things out, at least at some level. Coming back here and starting a practice in San Diego, frankly, was a lot easier than anything.
I was about to ask you, which one did you find easier? Because I can only assume the one that you were born and bred in had to be a little easier just because you knew it.
Well, I mean, you take for granted things that happen here. Like, for example, back in those days, if you tried to make a phone call across town and it was raining, right? The technology was so old and beat up because I describe it as been on vacation for 50 years. It had deteriorated so much that you couldn't hear anyone on the other side of the line because it was lead-based cabling that was
standard lead. Yeah.
And now, and so here you make a phone call, it works, right? And you also have the reality of people coming out of this whole different environment from a socioeconomic standpoint.
Right.
Do things there, and you're not sure what's going to happen, whether it's going to work or not from a marketing standpoint. Here, you have a fairly predictable market. You do certain things and you can expect certain results. Not always perfect, but you have a fairly good idea of what's going to happen.
Well, if I may throw in there too, if in this kind of a market, you can actually do a survey or a poll or a group of people, whatever you want to call it, and you're going to get very feasible and sound results because of the fact that they've been in this. It's not like those other folks, like you said, that were transitioning from one government and one economy to a completely different situation.
Yeah, I mean, we could talk about this all day, but just to sort of give you an idea is, one of the more interesting realities is that there was no civil code for 50 years, right? There was no business being done, so there was no need for it, right? Not internally. All their business was outbound from the country to other countries, more or less, and internally it was a mess. So they literally had to resurrect from the 30s, between the two world wars, the civil code that they had at the time, and then use that as their foundation and basically built on top of that, borrowing from the successful European economies, the US economy, the other first world economies, as they were trying to figure out what made the most sense for them. It was fascinating to live through.
No, I can imagine. So we kind of went over quite a few, so I'm going to skip down to, because I'll ask this one together. So it's a two-parter. What gave you the most traction? And on that same note, what was the biggest pitfall that you learned from?
In my current practice, you mean, and how I built it?
Yes, and the one that you're in now.
Right. So just to finish the story first.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you had. I apologize.
No, that's okay.
I thought you were done.
We got caught up in Eastern Europe, and it's easy. It's easy
to do, right?
Yeah, it's interesting stuff.
So you were in San Diego. You were opening up the new branch for the life science and startups in the corporate world.
Right, and really, it was a life science firm. So the original practice, concept of being outsourced general counsel, doing a corporate transactional practice, I really sort of put on the side and focused primarily on the IP stuff, and was with two IP boutiques, that one for 9 years, and then joined another firm for 7 years, very similar, not quite as large, based in California. And meanwhile, the feature was IP. So it was mostly patents and trademarks on the what's called prosecution as opposed to litigation, getting them issued through the Patent and Trademark Office in the US and then taking them around the world, which was a really nice complement to my international experience anyway, because then it meant traveling the world and meeting lawyers like me and our firm who were doing the same sort of things in different countries, because you needed to have those resources if your clients had technology worthy of seeking protection.
Right. International exposure. Yeah.
Right. And so that continued until 2017, when I joined a much larger international full service firm to open their San Diego office and become the IP focus for the firm in San Diego. And that's when the practice. Were
you kind of the guru at that point as far as within the circles? Had you kind of become the guy that most people came to when they had a question to?
Well, within the firm, yes.
That's what I mean. Within your network of.
Yeah, I mean that was the objective from the beginning, right? Was to try to become that person, and certainly in San Diego, I suppose I'm one of them, but there are many.
Don't brag on yourself a little bit, man. This is the time to shine. I mean, okay. Let me just say this: you wouldn't be on the show, and you wouldn't be sitting here and have success if you have not had success. Granted, I know the truth. That means we also have failures. That's the only way we have great success is to have some failures along the way. But the
Right.
reality is you've obviously done some pretty good things that become quite formidable in your arena. So kudos.
Well, thank you for that. So Interlink Law Group is the firm I'm with now, which is actually a smaller group of the attorneys that were at that larger international firm.
So that was a break off.
Right. Well, it was more of the larger firm kind of melted down in 2019.
Oh, okay. I missed that. Okay.
Yeah, one of those.
So they're not around, the larger firm. Are they gone completely now?
Uncertain about that, but it just didn't. I mean, just some significant business mistakes at the upper level management. We were sort of an outpost. The firm is based in New York. It all kind of just came down the pike unexpectedly, and then Interlink was formed by people that were at that firm, and the core of the Intelink group were people at that firm. So it was a nice collection of some really talented people in a variety of areas, which allows Intelink to be still an international, not quite full service firm, with IP and corp transactional as two of the main pillars within the firm. The third one being business litigation, which and then a number of smaller practices simply because there are fewer people doing them that are all complementary. So it's a pretty interesting group right now, and it fits my particular practice really well.
So you said you made a little comment there. You said it's not full service, but my assumption, and if I'm wrong, I'm wrong, and I'll eat it. But I'm assuming that if you have someone that needs full service, you probably have someone that you can work with that you have maybe closely that can take over whatever that might not be under your umbrella.
Yes, absolutely. I mean,
so even though you're not technically, that's why I was saying that technically it sounds like you're not full service, but you could still keep them in your home, so to speak, in your network, and they would feel like they're not really necessarily having to work with a bunch of other people.
Well, to get back to one of the things I think you brought up earlier, if you're going to be successful in any business, you've got to be able to do things outside of your area of expertise, bring in the appropriate people at the appropriate times,
yes,
in order to provide the service in an holistic manner, which certainly is what we try to do.
Yeah, I think one of the mistakes that a lot of folks, I don't know if this one was one with the larger firm, but one of the mistakes that I've seen with a lot of folks is they try to wear too many hats when they do that. And then, that old saying, jack of all trades and master of none, right?
You have to know your limitations. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I'll just ask you this, because I think I kind of heard some of it. What was your biggest pitfall in all of this? Let's just talk like when you look at life, what was the biggest one that you learned the most from, that gained you the most, whether it was the telecom or not? Just what was that?
I would say the realization that everything you do is based on relationships, right?
Connections.
And it doesn't matter what business you're in, whether it's law, whether it's some corporate position, you're gonna succeed or fail based on the quality of the relationships you build with people around you, right? And that goes to management, up and down. It goes to client relationships, customer relationships, supplier relationships, you name it. It's probably the most important thing.
You say that, and I just would like to tag on to that because I have a personal belief. As a salesperson, and I've been selling for 36 years, started when I was 14. I have my own story. We will not get into that. It'll bore you or it'll make you laugh. But the point that I learned from sales is, number one, everything you said there is absolutely correct. It is, it's all about connections, and it's all about, and the reason I was bringing this up is it doesn't matter who you're talking to. I have found that everything is sales. So if you look at it as that you're always on one side or the other, or many times you're doing both. For instance, on a both, if you go seek a job, right? Both sides are selling each other. I have the great job. I have the great skills. The reality is, if you apply that to anything, and I think this goes back so long, it's ridiculous, far back in history, it's about those relationships. So you have to learn how to, be a salesperson as well as be a buyer, and do it on both sides in a respectful way where you're never hurting the other one. I say that because for many years when I was younger, I stepped on as many people as I could. And I say that now because it's just who, I had a lot of learning to do, and I made a lot of mistakes. And then I learned that not only does that bite you in the butt because it is about connections, and the one you think doesn't matter, somehow 5 years later is sitting in a position where they're like, remember me? And so I truly believe that if you learn and really take heed of the fact that it is the connections, and if you take every connection as important as the last, you know. And what I mean by that is it doesn't matter their position in life or their station in life, whatever. If you treat each person equally for each connection and position that you meet, it just seems to work out much better. And I found that to be true. And I think that seems like a lot of what you said there. Sorry, I just want to tag that on. I don't know if you agree or disagree, but just how I see things.
No, I definitely agree. It's all about each look. You can't always avoid burning a bridge because sometimes circumstances are what
sometimes it's not on you, right, sir? Sometimes it's not on you. You can only do so much. There's two sides to every.
But it is absolutely counterproductive to do it, to do it out of spite or some other unreasonable reason. I mean, the idea is you want to maintain relationships as best you can. As you say, you never know when that person's going to show up again.
Yeah, I think part of what happened for me, I don't know if you've ever heard this saying, but the saying stuck with me after I heard it one time, and that is, if I'm not the problem, there is no solution. And that I tell you, once I heard that, I was like, okay, that just makes all because that means somebody said that's so negative. I'm like, no, actually it's not, because it puts it into your hands that you are the one that's capable of turning this around regardless of the situation. It's always in your ability to change your path and change your circumstances. So what was your proudest moment with all of this?
Probably there were several, actually. I mean, I've been very, very fortunate over the years.
Give me three then. Limit it to three.
Well, from a legal perspective, I think one of my proudest moments was just doing really well first year in law school, right? Because that opened so many doors and I was not really that sophisticated when I went to law school about law at all. I mean, I had really no idea. As I said, came from a medical family, and so for me, it was just having taken a year off between college and law school, done some traveling, which actually was the reason I wound up going to Europe later on. Coming back to school was what it was for the first time in my life. I really wanted to be there, right? And managed to find that perfect balance between working really hard and finding a way to release some of the tension, while I was in school, and was able to really bring it together. And so I was able to find this clerkship, which is in the legal world, a pretty good position to have. And it was a great way to start out because I got to work with somebody who'd been on the bench for 25 years, a lawyer for 25 years before that, or however long it was, and learned a lot of lessons and, in that position. And then, when I was in the business, running the business in Europe, raising the money, like actually getting somebody to give you millions of dollars to do the business that you envisioned was a heady moment, right? One of those,
Yes.
It rarely happens to anyone, and I got to experience that, right? And then the third was basically just successfully building this business, and over several of my biggest clients. When you as a sales guy, you can appreciate this, right? You're always trying to hit singles and doubles, right? Because that brings in the big. But every once in a while, you hit one out of the park, and those are really, really nice moments.
Yes.
When you really provide a good service for a client, they're very successful. As I said, they ring the bell. They make a lot of money. You help them do it. It's a very satisfying place to be.
I will tag in again on that because it's part of what we at Gladiator take very seriously. And what I mean by that is, when you're a marketing company, you don't have a tangible. There's no way to really, you can show them some deliverables, right? Like this is the content that we wrote, or these are the backlinks that we got, or the videos we posted, whatever the case may be. But it's really it's not a tangible in the sense that what you're really selling as marketing is money, right? The whole idea is that if you give me this much money and I do these things, then ultimately I'm going to bring you somewhere between 5 to, maybe as much as even 10 times the money you're giving me, right? And get that ROI. And it's funny because when we have those, I feel the same way. To me, it's the biggest home run is not just the and I heard this with you because you had to say 3, right? So really, it's what you've done collectively is the real big play. These 3 things combined, 1, 2, 3, and that's where you've gotten. And so for me, it's like last year was the culmination of one of my best years. I won't go into the numbers, but it was just one of my best years in sales as the only salesman for a company that's really, doing everything right, kind of like what you're talking about there, and putting the company first. Because ultimately, what it all boils down to is if our clients are successful, then we have success. period. That's where it's literally dependent, almost like a personal injury. I hate to say it because I know you're not in there, but it really is very much like a contingent. Like the only reason a personal injury is successful is because they've won the case. Otherwise, nobody gets anything, right? And it's all for naught, if you will. So right. It's funny that you pointed that out. Now, going back to the first one, the schooling, you mentioned there was somebody. Would that be who you consider maybe the mentor of your life, or do you have one that gave you the best piece of advice?
I think I've had several mentors over the years, or at least people that I would consider mentors. This was a federal judge who, as I said, had been on. When by the time I clerked for him, he'd been on the bench for 25 years, and I was a solo clerk. And he, one of the realizations as a federal judge in his courtroom, they rule the roost, right? He might as well be king, right? And so, you as a law clerk become kind of a prince, right? And so. Right. All the lawyers come and kowtow to you. But the really intimidating part of it is that I was a 25 or 6-year-old kid trying to advise this 70-something-year-old guy who had a wealth of experience about what he should do on these legal matters. And it was intimidating because you don't have that much confidence. As confident as I am, this was real world stuff. This is where, a lot of, high stakes things. And he said, and one thing that resonated with me from that experience that I've taken throughout the rest of my life is that he said to me in this context, look, if we make a mistake, we can fix it. And that has been something that stayed with me throughout the years.
I like that. I always love hearing, our philosophies said differently, because whenever you say it just a little bit differently, especially to somebody who's maybe heard your way of saying it, right? Like mistakes are the road to success. You say it that way, and that sounds so cliche to somebody, but then you say something like, hey, if we make a mistake, we can fix it. That becomes more down to earth and kind of like, it's okay to mess up. Nobody's perfect.
Well, that was exactly, cool. I think his point is right. No one is perfect, and you are, right.
No, I'm sorry. My point is only I like hearing people say it where it's not necessarily the cliche way or the thing that we've all heard, and it's more like, hey man, I've been there, and just know this, because that's how it felt to me, the way that he said that to you.
Oh yeah. And I've made many mistakes in my career. Fortunately I've had a lot of success too, but it's been, you can't live in this life without making mistakes.
No, you can't. I won't even begin to say it. Or go off on it. I'll just say this one thing. I truly believe the most successful people, and I have been pretty successful, the most successful people I have always found are also the people that have failed the most, because if you're not trying, you're not doing anything, and there's neither failure or success. And the fact is, if you have success, then you start to try more things, and you realize that some of them are going to work and some of them aren't. It's just the way it is. Right. What do most people not know about you when it comes to, say, a quirk or a habit? Something strange that you do, maybe a hobby.
That's an interesting question, because when I saw that sort of in the pregame here, I was actually thinking more of something that people know about me, as opposed to don't know about me. But
right.
But in all honesty, probably this whole experience in Eastern Europe is something that not everyone knows, right?
Very private kind of thing.
It only comes up if I sit down and actually meet with them for breakfast, for lunch, for coffee, and we spend an hour together and we talk about our histories, and we don't always even do that.
Right.
But that's the thing probably that comes up most often, because it's a relatively unusual thing for anyone to do, to sort of resign from, a career that was going well and move to a part of the world where nobody knew what it was. No one knew if the Russians were.
It was in turmoil. It wasn't bad, but it was in turmoil. It was, your move. It's like, hey, there's a storm. I think I want to go sit in the middle and see what happens. Which I mean, again, I meant what I said. I like it because you knew. Look, here's what anybody knows through our history, and you obviously pinpointed it, is those situations when you're talking about countries, particularly, right? They offer a lot of opportunity. Period. Turmoil offers opportunity, and it's not necessarily that it's, the way that you did it. I think seems pretty realistic, because it sounded like they need telecommunications. You know what I mean? I think that was your right. telecom was your thing over there. So
yeah, and part of what we did was actually create infrastructure, which was
I was about to say, I imagine part of what they're living on now is and in part somewhat due to some of the things, not all of it. I'm not trying to give you those kind of kudos, but obviously you had a piece of it in a certain part of that world. When you were there for 10 years.
Tiny little piece.
Still a piece. You know what? I truly believe in 6 degrees of separation, Ross, and I mean that. You take 1 degree out, then the butterfly effect just turns to, then we have a whole craziness. So,
right.
With that, what craziness? What's the craziest thing that you have ever done? Would it be going over there? Would you consider that to be the craziest thing as well, or is there something even crazier that we haven't talked about?
Well, I've done quite a few crazy things in my life. So, again, these travel experiences were pretty interesting. And I'm not sure if it's something I did intentionally, but certainly happened. Maybe that happened to me would be the craziest thing, a way to describe it.
Right.
So on one of these extended travel trips, I actually trekked in the Himalayas. And while I was coming down from what's called the Annapurna Sanctuary, which is where the base camp for those who are looking to summit those mountains, which are incredible. So if you've never been to Nepal, go.
I would love to. I'm in the Rockies, but these are still, as beautiful as these are, we all know that they're still not what the world has to offer.
For me, the first lesson there was sort of remembering, I've been to the Rockies many times, and there's people that you look to see the top of the mountains. And then when you're in the Himalayas, the angle gets much steeper. And
and you can't see the top sometimes because of the clouds.
It's a really bizarre experience. But anyway, I got lost in the jungle. I was trekking in the Himalayas and literally had to climb down a stream to find the trail again.
Oh my God.
Now, fortunately, I had a lot of experience hiking. I actually was in the Boy Scouts and all that stuff, and used that opportunity to do a lot of hiking and have done a lot on my own. So while it was kind of frightening, I also knew what I had to do to find my way. And by the time I got back to the path, I was covered. My feet were covered in leeches. I was exhausted, and I thought I was going to have to turn around and head back to Pokhara, which is the town that I hiked out of, as opposed to what my plan was, which was to get to Jomson. So those who know Nepal at all will be familiar with these names. But actually was able to make the trip because just happened along the trail was a Nepalese guy. His name was Narayan. I'll never forget it.
Mm-hmm.
And I paid him $40 to carry my backpack to the place I was trying to get to that day. He spoke a little bit of English, so it cost me $40 and some dirty T-shirts I'd gotten from Hong Kong earlier in my trip. And the one thing a lot of people, this will correct a misconception. If you ever get leeches, okay? People think you light a match and you burn them off, right? And you can do that, but it's a really hard way to do it. If you have chewing tobacco and you wet it, you can just wipe them right off. It was
just literally like a sponge.
Exactly. It was, and he
do they leach onto the tobacco? Is that what it is? They just leach, or the tobacco just releases the suction that they have.
He called it leech. In his words, leechy poison.
Oh, wow. So it poisons them. Okay.
It just wiped them right. I guess there was something in the tobacco that made them release their
right. It just
came right off.
And a lot safer than trying to put a burnt match to your body and get a leech off,
Yeah, it was just my feet, fortunately, but still, it was pretty harrowing. And so that was a pretty crazy experience.
That honestly, that is just insane. So real quick, I know you're from San Diego. So you grew up in San Diego when it was like 2 cities ago, right?
Well, actually, I didn't grow up in San Diego.
Oh, I thought you grew up. I'm sorry. Where did you grow up then?
I grew up in the Philadelphia area.
What was it? Where, like in Philly, in the metro area?
Yeah. And
so what was that like?
It was it was a wonderful place to grow up. I mean, I had a very, very stable family. As I said, it's a family of doctors. My father was a doctor. My parents were married for decades. My siblings are all doctors. Literally, there were 4 of us. 3 of them are doctors. I'm the black sheep of the family as a lawyer. And growing up in that area was very much idyllic. I moved to San Diego after I finished law school. So I was in Boston at law school and moved to San Diego for that first job with the federal judge.
Now I understand. My uncle and cousin. My cousin is engineer, graduated Drexel. He's a city planner for Philadelphia, and my uncle still lives there. He's been there since I think I want to say 78, 70, at least 77, because that was the first time I remember visiting him, and they still have that same house, and they've always loved it. I got one of my greatest, fondest memories personally was going there to visit and going to see all the incredible historical places that Philadelphia has to offer, right? Like just so many of them. That was one of the really cool experiences. So who, and this question I'm directing at current, so who you're working with now in your circle, who is it that you most respect in your current circle of colleagues?
That's a great question. Many of the people that I work with are worthy of it, right? I mean, we're all doing a pretty good job in terms of what we're doing. People are available, but I would probably say that the managing partner of the firm is a colleague. He was one of the founders of the firm. He had the foresight to leave that other firm as it was falling apart a lot more quickly than I did. As I said, many mistakes over the years, and one of them was hanging in there longer than I should have before joining them.
Done that one.
So yeah, I mean, he's got a practice that's very similar to mine, in the sense that he's got he's a patent lawyer himself. He's got a very vibrant patent and trademark practice. He's got a corporate transactional practice that's very sophisticated. He's also been an entrepreneur. So he's a younger version of me, basically.
What's his name?
His name is Brad Bertoglio. He's the
Brad Retoglio. Am I saying that correctly?
Toglio, probably.
Retoglio.
Right. Yes, he's based in Newport Beach. He's the managing partner of the firm, one of the founders. Very good guy, smart guy. Very, very good to work with, and really interesting perspectives.
Nice. That sounds like a very, very interesting person in the sense of if he's younger than you already, and he's having. It sounds quite impressive for considering that he's obviously younger, and I don't think you would mention it if he wasn't a little bit more younger, probably even than me myself. So that's always impressive when they're doing that kind of stuff at that age.
Yeah, he is impressive.
He is younger than me. Yeah. So I'll make this one quick. What is your favorite conference?
So there is an organization called the Licensing Executive Society. I don't know if you've heard of these guys, but this is, as it sounds, an organization of licensing professionals. And these are the people, for example, who work in business development. It's called in the pharmaceutical industry is one example, right? Because it's across all the different industries. And they are always out looking for opportunities to license in technology for their pharmaceutical companies so they can take it through the FDA process and ultimately offer a product that's going to help people in some way, right? And so this organization facilitates the training of how to do licensing the right way. It also, that's the content side. It also provides you an opportunity to network with other licensing professionals who are coming at it from different industries, different aspects of the ecosystem.
Right.
And my favorite conference is the Licensing Executive International Conference that happens each year in some interesting place, typically, but not always.
But it's international, which means it's not always going to be in America. That's a guarantee, right? It's going to be
correct. This year, actually, for the first time in several years, because of the pandemic, the meeting was in Venice, and Venice, Italy, and it was really, really fun. It was a really well done meeting.
I would just love to go to Italy. Sorry,
yeah, it was on the island of Lido, which is someplace I've been to Venice several times, but I've not been to Lido itself, which is sort of a resort island, and that sort of helps create
it's beautiful
Venice. And got together a lot of people I hadn't seen in several years, obviously because of the pandemic. But then some really, really nice events in the evenings in various locations around Venice, which was really...
was an island, so obviously you had some beautiful ocean kind of places, right?
Right. Well, it was the Adriatic, right? So the view across the beach is out into the Adriatic, and then on the other side is the Venice Harbor, and then Venice itself, the San Marco Square, which is one of the famous locations, is across the harbor from that.
Yeah,
island.
I bet that was gorgeous.
Yeah, it was really nice.
Yeah, I'm a little jealous now. Seriously, of course, I won't deny that ever since I saw and I found out it was a remake. Just to say that real quick, but the Italian Job. Remember the movie with Donald Sutherland and Mark Zuckerberg? Or no, I mean, sorry, Mark Wahlberg. Excuse me.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, it's ever since that movie of like, I guess because they just showed so much intricacy, and it was right after I think 007 did his first movie, which a lot of that took place. So it's very much want to go over there and see Venice and all that. So that's cool. When it comes to tools, or actually, no, I will ask this real quick. Do you have a podcast that you like the most? Is there a podcast that you actually listen to in concerns to what you do?
I have not listened to many podcasts. I've not gotten to that point yet. I just started listening to a few recently because I joined Spotify, and so it was mostly been music. And not that I've discovered podcasts; I've never been there, but it's not easy to find one that's a regular that you really like, right? And
I get it.
The few that I've listened to are okay. It's more the content, the topic, rather than the actual person who's organizing it. So I don't listen to any particular podcast on a regular basis unless they're dealing with topics that are of interest to me.
I will say this, and I'll make it quick. But it's funny because I make this podcast. I do some other things on my own, and somebody said to me one day, or I was talking to somebody. I was like, "Hey, have you had a chance?" And he's another caster and YouTuber, right? And I was like, "Hey, have you had a chance to check this out?" And he goes, "Man, I love you." And he's like, "I support you, and I'll do all this." But he's like, "I don't watch them. I just make them." And I was like, it's funny because, and I think some of it has to do, and I might be wrong, but our age group, we didn't grow up with having all this type of content available to us, right? We just had records and tapes and then TV and movies, right? And I like making the stuff. I just don't ever have the time to sit there and listen to anything. In fact, the more I start doing this type of stuff and the more I do it, the less I even have time to watch maybe a show or even a sporting event that I used to make time for. So it's kind of funny. Favorite tools or software, and that's going to end it for us. What's the thing that and it might be one and the same, by the way, when I say this, but what is the tool that you cannot live without?
I would probably say Outlook. And secondarily LinkedIn.
Oh yeah.
And the reasons,
especially for you, I totally get it. Go ahead, sir. But I get it. Go ahead.
Right. So for Outlook, it's a way, for Outlook, it's the combination of email and calendar and contacts. And LinkedIn is sort of like the contact part of that on steroids, because for the first time, there's actually a program out there that people maintain themselves, as opposed to trying to keep updating your contact database, right? And so LinkedIn has become, and even more so with the pandemic when that began to happen.
Oh yeah.
As a sales guy, you can appreciate this, right? So yep. Building relationships is a face-to-face kind of thing, right? There's no better way to do it. And for those 2 years, it was impossible to meet face-to-face. People just weren't doing it.
LinkedIn was about your own, that and Zoom, like LinkedIn, meet them on LinkedIn and then go over to Zoom to talk to them.
Well, that's exactly right. LinkedIn became the focus of my client development activities along with Zoom, and also as client relationships as well. But LinkedIn is an amazing tool. I mean, it allows you to keep up with what people are doing. You can be on it 24/7 if you want to be, in terms of the feed that constantly happens. I
have it on your app. You can have the app on your phone with constant notifications. So, the moment somebody has reached back out to you, which I know for a fact for what you do is very advantageous, that you want to know and make that decision. Do I want to quickly text them back, call them back, or do whatever before I lose that opportunity?
Right. So those are probably the two most important tools for my practice, and primarily from a client development standpoint, because that's, in my opinion, that's the thing that successful lawyers need to do. You need to be able to develop a client base. It's the only security you get in any service kind of business is your relationships with your clients. And without that, you are at the mercy of whoever has those relationships. Right, because if you're an attorney that's dependent on somebody else for the work that you do and the salary that you get, then you're at their mercy, regardless of their intent, whether it's malicious or otherwise, without having your own client relationships and being able to maintain them, that's the key.
No, I'll say this I've told a lot of people many years, if you don't like the big heavy duty CRMs, you really have most of the essential tools in Outlook for it to be it. I mean, the simplest of terms is Outlook is in essence a CRM because it has everything that you need for client management relations. You can literally use that in the same way that it's funny because most CRMs attach to it, right? And they only use the calendar portion of it, but there's so much you can do. People don't know how much you can do in Outlook. You can run an entire email campaign. I mean, you can do so much with macros and other things. Really quite powerful.
And I use it that way. I mean, I've toyed with the idea of putting together some sort of a training, some sort of a
video
training
class
kind of business, even to sort of teach professionals on how to do client development using Outlook as the central tool, because it has so many features, and they all tie together. And it's email, it's calendar, and it's contact database. And within the contact database, you can do all kinds of things that are that allow you to track and sort and follow up, which is the number one thing when it comes to client development, right? So
I guarantee you there's times at Microsoft that people are like, does anybody know how powerful our Outlook is, that they don't need to go out and pay a separate fee for CRMs? Although, I mean,
I do.
I know. Exactly. I love it. Well, listen, Ross, I really appreciate you being here. Thank you so much. Maybe in a year or so, you can come back and give us an update. If you enjoyed being here, we'll reach out to you again. It's one of the things that we plan on doing once we get to be about a year or so old. So Hope you enjoyed it.
All right. I did. Thank you very much for having me.
No, thank you so much. I'm going to just sign off real quick with this. Again, thank everybody for listening and watching. We will be doing different things. We got some new things coming up in the future, but obviously we will have another episode coming here soon. By the way, all of Ross's information will be, and just so you know, Ross, on a side note, that'll all be, like your website, all those things will be put up in titles and graphics and things like that, and also be in the description for you once and that description should be pretty synonymous on all the different platforms. So you'll be able to read all about Ross and learn all about him and learn all about our other guests as we move along. And with that, thank you so much. Again, if you are a lawyer or a law firm and you need some help getting some new clients, please reach out to Gladiator Law Marketing, or you can reach out, that's .com, or you can reach out to Michael at gladiatorlawmarketing.com, and we will help you. We'll even do a free consultation, which quite honestly, our free consultation is a full audit of both your website as well as your competitor's website, and we do not charge you a thing, and that data is quite frankly invaluable. With that said, thank you so much. Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Thanks for listening to 15 Minutes. Be sure to subscribe, and we'll see you next time.